Hi, it's Rachel with Stirring the Deep. I've been talking about gaining that mind of Christ, which is God being His Spirit, the quality, the nature. He's Spirit, right? So it's all the characteristics of His Spirit becoming a part of us. We're becoming part of the divine nature. We're becoming one with Him. It's like, and thus we're governed by Him. That's the kingdom coming. And that is what's starting to happen now for those that understand how He's coming. If you're still looking externally to the clouds, the physical clouds, you're looking in the wrong place. Christ told us not to look there. He said, look within. So if you're looking within, then you're starting to learn the principles and the wisdom of God, and you're starting to walk in that because that grace is abundant towards you. So as you start to hear that wisdom of God that guides you in the paths of peace, in righteousness, and so you start to walk in that grace floods in that obedience, and just fills your life with the blessings of God. And that just encourages you to walk all the more, right? So you're becoming a sponge and soaking in that presence of God and all that He is, and it's becoming a part of you. So that's what you reflect. And that's why you shine brighter and brighter into the day, because you're gaining that and being governed by that Spirit. And so I've been talking about different aspects of that Spirit and how it's a huge shift in your mind. So as you're learning, you're realizing, wow, I'm like starting to think very differently than how I used to, because you're leaving what is of death and of the flesh and of mankind's wisdom all behind, and you're moving into what is of the Spirit and what is of life, what is of eternal life. So you have this complete change and shift in your mind. And so I've been learning a lot about these different, because as I'm experiencing it, it's like, wow, this is what's happening, and I'm seeing the power of it because I'm seeing the fruit of it in my life. So I talked about the pursuing the different wisdom and about your expectations, right? And that they're not in the things and of the physical and of the flesh, but they're the things of the Spirit. So another part of this renewing of the mind is trustworthiness and being a trustworthy person, because God is trustworthy, and that's tied into being faithful. He is so faithful because He's trustworthy, and that's why you can totally give over your mind and trust Him to guiding in your life, because He proves Himself faithful. He proves Himself trustworthy, right? When you know someone, that there's someone you can really trust in your life, you can relax. You can say, hey, will you take care of this for me, or help me with this? And you know absolutely they will do that, right? That's to be trustworthy. And we see this in the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, right? So where He's giving them these talents, and you have these different people, and they do different things with them. And it's the ones who really invested those talents that were given more. And that's what happens. The talents are wisdom. The wisdom and the ways of God. So as you gain wisdom of God and hear something that you know that, okay, this is the right thing, this is the most loving thing, this is what's truly honoring. And as you walk in that, you're being faithful with those talents. And as you do that, you gain more. So a lot of people, if you're not listening or growing, that's because you're not been faithful with what you have been given. Right? But as you take those truths and you act on them, meaning you're obedient to those, then you're proving yourself as faithful to those, as a good steward, and trustworthy, so God can give you more. And so I wanted to break this out a little bit, because we can be trustworthy with God, to other people, and to ourselves. So these are just 3 different areas that God will work in you and teach you about, and how to be trustworthy. And fundamental to being trustworthy is that it is your desire in your heart to be truly loving and kind to people, that you don't wish their harm, you don't want to bring out personal vengeance, that you truly want their best. Okay, and that is at the core of being trustworthy. Because think about when you're trusting someone else, if you have to believe they really want your best, or you can't trust them because you think, well, they're going to harm me. Now, we may hurt each other unintentionally, right? Because we don't know, but that's very different than having a heart of intent to harm. Okay, because if that's your intent, you are not trustworthy. But there are people that want that, the people that want the personal vengeance, the people that continue to blame and not forgive, that they don't show mercy. Those are all characteristics of not being trustworthy, okay, by God's definition. So when you're being trustworthy to God, right, with Him, first of all, that's what He cares about. Is that your heart? Is that your desire to truly love and to learn about that and how to love? Okay? And when you do that, He will counsel you through all the issues you have. If you have still anger and bitterness and resentment, if that's your desire, He will counsel you and work through all those so that all those are purged from your life. It's amazing how He can do that. So the other part of being trustworthy to God is that's one. The second is that you realize that the wisdom of the world brings you to death, and you are seeking the wisdom of God. Because if that is your desire, then you're becoming trustworthy to God, right? Because you're wanting to walk in His ways. It's like a child, instead of being rebellious and not wanting to listen to the parent, they're not very trustworthy. But if you have a child that is really wanting to learn and say, hey, I really want to be obedient to you, Dad, help me, teach me how to do that. Okay, wow, that child is showing itself trustworthy. Okay, so in your actions and in your life, you're seeking that wisdom. So if you're showing yourself trustworthy, that means you're spending that time listening in quietness and stillness, and listening to the inner counsel, tuning into that pure conscience that is guiding you in the paths of life. Because when you get really still and quiet, you start hearing what is the right thing to do. And the littlest thing, and when you start walking in that, that just grows. So that pretty soon that's just all that's guiding you. But a lot of us have ignored it so much because we follow the wisdom of the world that we've ignored that pure conscience that's right there and tuning into it, which is that very wisdom of God. But if you start tuning into that and listening and really following it, you're going to see just how beautiful and pure it really is. Okay, so you're seeking that above all. Above all. And those who have these qualities, those are the ones that God is seeking to use to help bring His light into this earth, because by nature that's what they're doing. So again, if you are faithful with a few, you get more. And even in Matthew 25, in verse 21, it says, His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Powerful, okay? So now when you're wanting to be trustworthy to yourself, because this is very important, and this ties right into what I was just saying, is that, as I said, Christ is knocking at the door of your spirit. I want to guide you. I want to reshape your mind so that you become this eternal spirit being. Let me do that for you. Let me give you my mind. Let me establish your thoughts, which establishes your words and your actions and everything else. And so when you start listening to that pure conscience in you, guiding you in life and seeking that wisdom that is pure and of God, then as you start following it, you're proving to yourself that you're trustworthy. And you're not compromising that. And God will show you how to live in love in the most loving ways without compromise. Okay? Because that is what you serve, is God above all else. It's that spirit of wisdom in all that He is. So if you're justifying or following that lie that many people follow, that you're missing out somehow, well, I know this is the right thing to do, but I'm going to do this because otherwise I might miss out on something. That's the lie that the world feeds you. But once you realize that's a lie and you continue to stay in the things of God, so you continue to follow that conscience, you show yourself trustworthy. And when you get to that point, you can follow and trust your desires. And when you're following your desires, you're doing what you desire. And that is what God wants for you, to give you the desires of your heart. And this is the path to doing that. So when you start following that pure conscience and walking in it, you can trust your desires to guide you. You can trust that to guide you because you're proving yourself trustworthy that you're walking in it. Okay? And that is, again, part of it, is that when you're walking and following that pure conscience, remember, it's going to be honoring to you and to God, to everyone. Every act is going to be full of His mercy and His justice and His love and His righteousness and His peace and His mercy. That's what that is when you're really walking and following that inner counsel. So that's how you show yourself trustworthy to yourself, as you're following that. Okay? Now, to be trustworthy to other people, I mentioned this a little bit in another video, but first of all, you have all these things I just mentioned, meaning you're following your inner counsel, and your intent is to love them and not to harm them, to help them, for good for them, and you're seeking that wisdom of God and following that, okay, which is following that pure conscience. So all that, when that's the foundation, the things that allow you to be trustworthy to someone else is, first, you have to really listen to them. So many people don't listen, but for there to be real communication and connection between two people, so I can be trustworthy to someone else if they're really listening to me. If they're not really listening to my needs or what I'm telling them, then they can't be trustworthy. If a child is not listening to the parent, then they're not trustworthy, right? If an employee isn't listening to a boss, they're not trustworthy. If a spouse isn't listening to the other spouse, you're not showing yourself trustworthy. So listening is very important, okay? To really listen to and hear what their spirit, what the core of them is saying. The other is that, what I mentioned before, is when you're asked to do something and they're asking you, whether it's a parent, child, employee, boss, or marriage, or friend, that if you ask, you're assuming that that person is going to do it, okay? That's if they're trustworthy, that they're going to do it, and they're going to do it in the timeline that you're agreed upon. And sometimes you have to lay that out, that, in the next month, in the next day, in the next hour, when is that expectation? Because that helps to build the trustworthiness. So that takes that good, clear communication, okay? And again, if you can't do something that they're asking of you, that you're clear about that. All right, so there's no confusion. You're not being misleading or manipulating or deceiving. So you're clear about what you're doing between each other, okay? And again, a lot of times your expectations with other people are just that they are going to do what's best, that they're going to do what's good because their intentions are good. They're going to do what's loving and kind. So that's your expectation. But how they carry that out, that's up to God. Let God guide them perfectly in His wisdom. You're not telling them how to do everything. No, but your intent is it's the things of the Spirit, that this is how you would act. It's the things of the Spirit, not the actual action. Let God direct the steps. Okay? And then also, you do what you say, and you say what you do. There's no hypocrisy there. If you're going to do something, then you do it. And if not, you don't. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. You're clear about that. That makes you trustworthy. These principles are, when you hear them, it just seems very straightforward. Wow, makes total sense, because that's how truth is. When you hear it, it just makes sense. But a lot of times, because we've been so wrapped up in these other things of a mind of a flesh that's just full of death and deception and justifications and corruptions, that we don't really understand what these pure concepts of God are about. But as you seek that mind of God to be governed by Him and that wisdom and His thoughts, then you start to understand what these principles mean. And when you start to walk in these things that are very simple, look at what it will produce in your life. And that's what I mean. Like right now, you can be this trustworthy person. You can have all that I was just talking about. And as you walk in that, you are that trustworthy person. God can trust you more, and your life will just grow up around you. That's where it's those roots growing downward, but your life the fruit is growing upward. Okay, so the focus is on that wisdom and following that. Okay, when you do, it just grows this beautiful life around you, the paths of peace, the abundant life that Christ came to give. Till next time, keep stirring the deep. It's the one thing that changes everything else.